There's something strange happening in Canada right now. People are earning good money, but feeling poor. They're working full-time, but not moving forward. And slowly, without making noise, many are starting to question everything, because the life they imagine doesn't match the reality they're living. And the gap between those two, it's getting bigger in 2026. If you talk to someone living in Toronto or Vancouver today, you'll notice a pattern. They're not complaining loudly. They're not making headlines. But in quiet conversations, the same feeling keeps coming up again and again. It's getting harder to save, harder to plan, harder to feel secure. So what's actually going on? Why does it feel like even people with stable jobs can't get ahead anymore? Why are everyday expenses starting to feel overwhelming? Why are people who once saw Canada as the ultimate destination now feeling uncertain about their future? And more importantly, is this just a temporary phase? Or is Canada slowly becoming a place where simply living is no longer sustainable? If you're thinking about moving to Canada, already living there, or just trying to understand the reality behind the headlines, these are questions you can't ignore. Because what's happening right now isn't just about money. It's about lifestyle. It's about stability. And for many people, it's about whether the dream still makes sense. On this channel, we don't follow hype. We focus on reality, backed by data, real experiences, and clear breakdowns you can actually use. If you want honest insights about cost of living, global opportunities, and what life is really like in countries like Canada, consider subscribing. Because in a world full of filtered success stories, understanding the full picture is what helps you make the right decisions. And today, we're breaking down 10 brutal reasons living in Canada is becoming impossible in 2026. Let's start with something almost everyone feels first: housing. Right now, in major Canadian cities, rent isn't just expensive, it's overwhelming. In places like Toronto and Vancouver, a simple one-bedroom apartment can easily cost over $2,000 a month. And that's not luxury. That's just a basic place to live. Now think about this. Even if someone earns around $4,000 to $5,000 a month after taxes, nearly half of that can disappear just on rent, before groceries, before transportation, before anything else. And that's where the pressure begins. Because when rent takes that much of your income, everything else starts to feel tight. You start calculating every expense. You delay plans. You think twice before spending on anything non-essential. And for newcomers, the situation can feel even more intense. Many arrive with expectations based on older information, thinking they'll settle in a few months, find a decent place, and start building their life. But the reality they face is very different. Limited availability, high demand, and landlords who can choose from dozens of applicants. So even finding a place becomes stressful. And when you finally do, it often costs more than you expected. According to recent housing reports and rental market data, this isn't a short-term spike. Supply is limited, demand is high, and prices have been consistently rising over the past few years, which raises an uncomfortable question. If housing, the most basic need, is already this expensive, how do people manage everything else? And that brings us to the second pressure point that people feel almost immediately: groceries. Not long ago, buying basic food items in Canada felt manageable. Today, it's a different story. People are walking into grocery stores and walking out with fewer items, but paying significantly more. Milk, eggs, vegetables, rice, everyday essentials have all seen noticeable price increases. And it's not just about inflation as a concept. It's about real moments. Standing at the checkout and feeling surprised by the total. Cutting back on items you used to buy regularly. Choosing cheaper alternatives just to stay within budget. For families, this hits even harder because groceries aren't optional. You can delay buying a phone. You can postpone a trip, but you can't stop buying food. Reports from sources like Statistics Canada and National Food Price Analyses show that grocery costs have increased steadily, putting additional pressure on households already dealing with high rent. And when you combine housing and food costs, you start to see a pattern. A large portion of income is already committed to just surviving, not growing, not investing, just maintaining. And that creates a feeling many people don't expect when they move to a developed country, a feeling of being stuck. But here, where it gets even more frustrating, because while expenses are rising, income isn't keeping up. Many people assume that in a country like Canada, salaries naturally adjust with the cost of living. But in reality, wage growth has been much slower compared to how quickly expenses have increased. Yes, people are earning, but their purchasing power, that's where the real decline is happening. You might get a small raise, but if rent increases more than that, if groceries cost more than last year, that raise doesn't feel like progress. It feels like you're just trying to catch up. And over time, that creates a quiet pressure. Not dramatic, not always visible, but constant. You start working more hours, taking on extra shifts, trying to stay ahead, but somehow it never feels like enough. And this is the point where many people begin to question things internally, not out loud, but in their own thoughts. Is this worth it? And this is where things start to connect in a deeper way. Because when your expenses keep rising and your income doesn't grow at the same pace, the pressure doesn't just stay financial. It becomes psychological. You start thinking more about money than you ever did before. Simple decisions don't feel simple anymore. Going out for dinner, you hesitate. Buying something you like, you delay it. Planning for the future, you're unsure. And over time, this creates a quiet kind of stress that many people don't talk about openly, but they feel it every single day. Now here's the part that makes it even more complicated. Even if you're educated, even if you have experience, even if you've done everything right, finding the right job isn't always easy anymore. Canada continues to welcome a large number of immigrants every year, and while that creates opportunities in the long run, in the short term, it also creates intense competition. You'll often hear stories of highly qualified people working jobs far below their skill level. Engineers driving for ride-sharing apps, graduates working retail jobs, experienced professionals starting from scratch. Not because they lack ability, but because the market is crowded. And when too many people are competing for limited opportunities, something has to give. Usually it's expectations. People lower their standards. They accept jobs they didn't plan for. They tell themselves it's temporary. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it lasts much longer than expected. And while all of this is happening, there's another system that's quietly under pressure. Healthcare. On paper, Canada's healthcare system is one of its biggest strengths. It's publicly funded, it's accessible, and for many services, it doesn't require direct payment. But in reality, access has become slower. In many areas, finding a family doctor can take months. Emergency rooms can have waiting times that stretch for hours, sometimes even longer depending on the situation. And when you're dealing with something urgent, time matters. This doesn't mean the system is broken, but it does mean it's under strain. With a growing population and limited resources, delays are becoming more common. And for someone who moved to Canada expecting smooth access to healthcare, this can feel unexpected. Now combine this with everything we've already talked about. High rent, expensive groceries, slow income growth, job market pressure, healthcare delays. Individually, each of these is manageable, but together, they create a lifestyle that feels heavier than people expected. And this is where I want to share something a bit more personal. From everything I've seen, researched, and observed, Canada is not a bad country. In fact, in many ways, it's still one of the most stable and safe places to live. But the difference is this: it's no longer an easy country. A few years ago, the path felt clearer. You move, you settle, you grow. Now, it requires much more patience, more planning, more financial awareness, and sometimes more compromise. That doesn't mean it's impossible, but it does mean expectations need to change. Because if you come in thinking everything will fall into place quickly, the reality might feel overwhelming. And that's exactly why understanding these challenges before making big decisions is so important. Not to discourage you, but to prepare you. Because the people who adapt are the ones who understand the situation clearly. Now at this point, you might be thinking, if life is getting this challenging, what about the bigger financial picture? Because it's not just about what you earn and spend. It's also about what you keep. And in Canada, taxes play a bigger role than many people expect. A significant portion of income goes toward federal and provincial taxes. And while these taxes fund important services like healthcare and infrastructure, for many individuals, the immediate impact feels noticeable. You work hard, you earn a decent salary, but when you see your take-home amount, it's lower than you imagined. And when that reduced income meets high living costs, the gap becomes even more visible. You start asking yourself, how much am I actually keeping at the end of the month? And more importantly, is this sustainable long-term? These are not extreme questions, they're practical ones, and more people are starting to ask them. But here's something even more subtle that often gets overlooked. It's not just the big expenses that add pressure, it's the smaller ones too. Transportation costs, phone bills, internet plans, insurance. Individually, they don't seem overwhelming, but combined, they quietly increase your monthly spending. And before you realize it, a large part of your income is already committed, which brings us back to that same feeling we talked about earlier, the feeling of being stuck in a cycle, working consistently, earning regularly, but still not moving forward the way you expected. And when that feeling continues for months or even years, it starts to change how people think about their future. Some begin to adjust their expectations, some push through, hoping things will improve, and some start considering a different path altogether. Before we move into the final part, where we talk about what this means long-term and why some people are even thinking about leaving. If you've made it this far, you're clearly someone who values understanding reality before making decisions. And that's exactly what this channel is about. So if you haven't already, consider subscribing, because content like this isn't about hype. It's about helping you see the full picture. And in today's world, that makes all the difference. And when you look at all of this together, a clear picture starts to form. This isn't about one single problem. It's about multiple pressures building at the same time. Housing is expensive. Daily expenses are rising. Income isn't keeping up. Opportunities feel more competitive. And when all of these factors combine, life doesn't necessarily collapse, but it becomes heavier, more calculated, more uncertain, more demanding. For some people, that challenge becomes motivation. They adapt, adjust, and slowly build their way forward. But for others, it leads to a different question. If the effort keeps increasing, but the progress feels limited, is it still the right place long